So here we go. So, well, first of all, thank you for coming back, Professor Spira. I really appreciate everything you do, your time, and the message that you bring forth for everybody. Um, I feel the reason that we're doing this again, and I enjoy speaking with you so much is because you are one of the only people, and through Arnold Ehart, there's also even though century old author, and you brought his work forth to the present moment, and are the the major speaker and voice of it. He's the only people that really speaks and says that there is a spiritual and mental and emotional correlation with the food that we eat, and that's really what we emphasize. That's what we work in. Is it's such a breeze of fresh air to know that there's other people that do the same. I believe that uh, Ahart also put a book that it was called Spiritual Dietetics, or or similar to that, correct? So he
Yeah. So we got where you got rational fasting for physical, mental, and spiritual rejuvenation. And
there
then
you
you
go.
got the physical fitness through superior diet, fasting, and dietetics, and also religious concept of physical, spiritual, and mental dietetics.
There you go. So those are the things that I think are phenomenal. And he talks a little bit and pinpoints just slightly on the subject on the mucus free diet system. His I think it was the best selling book and the flagship of
Right.
his work.
Yeah. Well, that's this one, the
Yeah,
mucus
and he
diet healing system, and
he
this
just
is
taps into it a little bit, but he
yeah,
doesn't.
yeah, yeah. It gets
He's like, yeah, I'll give you the juice later.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that's what we want to talk to you today, and go a little bit into that, so not just for your own personal experience. You have helped thousands of people. Same with Henry Hart. I think back in the day he was doing lectures for thousands of people in Europe and Los Angeles. So this is not a new concept, but definitely something that we haven't heard about much lately, of that, how that can impact ourselves. So just from your personal experience, from yourself, what are the you told me before about how you came from a very different diet, and around the age of 25, I believe you switched. So for you, what are the benefits that you saw, obviously in your physical and in your health, but on your mental health, on your mental functioning?
Yeah, mentally total transformation from just not being able to think clearly, not understanding the world around me, wanting to better understand why things are the way they are, but in on the search for it, but really never having the kind of clarity that I really want. And I was 19. I was 19 when I got in to Mucus's diet. Here's my before and after pictures. These were taken a year
Wow.
apart. So I went from
Gee.
where I was over 300, I was about 305 pounds, 310 pounds. And within 6 months, I'd lost 100 pounds, overcame numerous ailments, including skin issues and hemorrhoids and daily migraine headaches, and was on allergy medication since I was really young, and they had been, all the time. I'd constantly just be getting sick and blowing my nose all the time, going and getting moxicillins and penicillins and all these different antibiotics and things, and that was just my life. And when I got, there was a certain point in my life where I went on a specific path or a specific search for the answer to human suffering. And that was what spurred me on with that, was growing up and losing some parents that's really close at a pretty young age. So when I was 10 years old, I lost my grandma, who was really like my mother. I had a mother-son bond with my grandma, and she passed away unexpectedly. And, you know, they didn't tell me, they didn't say she was sick or anything, because she was still at the house. And I was just, you know, she had just been taking care of me a few days prior. And so when she passed away, that really changed me in terms of really not knowing how to, you know, cope with loss and grieve and any of that kind of stuff. So I went from being a fairly extroverted kind of little kid, you know, I was always hugging people and wanting to talk to people. I was one of those kids you had to tell me, don't talk to strangers, you know, because I just talk to everybody. And I went from that to being a lot more introspective or introverted. I didn't want to be touched anymore. If people would, because people would try to console, you know, as a kid, you know, if they see you looking sad, they want to come and like hug you or put their hand on your shoulder or something. And I had gotten to this thing where I didn't want to be touched, because I didn't like the energy of people feeling sorry for me. I just hated that. Now I would just rather go hide and be alone and not have people around me, you know, just with that look that people would give me. I just really didn't like that. And at that point, I dove into my artistic pursuits and my creative pursuits, really just head on. So I was just spending most of my time creating things and teaching myself how to dance, teaching myself how to play piano. And a week after my grandma passed away, my mom ended up in the hospital, had a heart attack, went in the hospital, had a triple bypass surgery. And then for the next 2 years, she was in hospital, and she had always been in and out of hospitals. That's why my grandma and my aunt raised me. Or I say that, you know, because I spent some time with my mom, but she was literally, there was a year where the 911 was called and the ambulance came to take her to the emergency room over 200 times in 1 year. So that was the life I was living. Was that's routine, where, you know, a couple times a week, take my mom, she's in the hospital for a couple days. Yeah, every couple days. Then she comes back, or she might stay there a little longer or go to a nursing facility, then, you know, make it back. But yeah, but this time she didn't come back. She was, and so she, for the next 2 years, she had both her legs amputated from the knee down, and I was with her throughout that whole experience. And she didn't listen to even the bad advice from the doctors of what she should eat and do. And so she's like, you know, so she's not doing anything good there. And so she just got sicker and sicker and sicker. And so she ultimately passed away, and I was 12. And so those experiences at a young age, and not getting any real information or any real good explanation. You know, at the time, my aunt would take me to Catholic Christian church, and I was active in that, and they would ask me, you know, and I would try to find out or ask a lot of questions, and I was asking the type of questions that they would try to they would like try to not answer, you know, or ignore, or be like, or things that they couldn't answer, and they would try to like, all right, anybody else got any questions? And so I wasn't getting what I needed there. And so once I was in high school, I kind of led a double life. So I led the life of a popular varsity football player, and did that thing, but as well as being a musician. I was really serious. I had no interest in being in the marching band, so I was in the jazz band and all the choirs and all that stuff, because I love music. And that was another thing with, you know, I threw myself into all kinds of activities to just sort of ignore any kind of feelings or
vent out the mind and keep
it's just stay really, really active. And but ultimately I've started to actively pursue this question of human suffering, and analyzing all kinds of, from the extremes of from the 400 years of slavery and that process, Holocaust, and just whatever I could find that was just on like genocide and murder and just rape and pillaging and the history. And it got really deep into history, or at least the history we have access to, or whatever has been written. That's a whole other topic, the problematic nature of some of that stuff. But ultimately I was in the search for what's the cure for, or the answer to human suffering, and a cure for a disease, if there is one that exists. And so that became a real mission of mine. And that put me on a trajectory where I started getting into self-help stuff. So when I got in trouble once because I was ordering, it used to have like the mail order stuff. There was no online yet. And so I was 15, 16 years old, and I would be ordering these self-help kinds of courses to come to the house, but I didn't have a credit card, so I forget what I did. I think what I used to do, I'd go get a
money order or something on the mail.
Well, I get a cashier's check. Yeah, like because I got in trouble once because my aunt, she ended up being happy that I was getting self-help stuff, but she didn't like that I was like keeping it from her, because I didn't want to say what I like, ask her, so I had to go get a cashier's check, like a American, whatever those are, the Western Union kind of thing. So I had to buy one of those and then mail that in, and then they would mail me, whatever I ordered. And so I was ordering a number of different things that were a lot of Nightingale Connet, for people that remember that, and that brand. They have a lot of self-help kind of things, and I was just getting all kinds of stuff like that. And that's when I got the Sedona method in that period, which is a releasing technique that we'll probably talk about a little later. But that's something that really helped me out once I did get into the Mucus diet healing system. But a couple other influential things at that time. But I was on that path, and then I went to college Conservatory of Music, University of Cincinnati, to pursue music. And it was at that time, my freshman year, I first met Willie Smart, aka Brother Air. But I knew him for about a year before he told me about the Mucus diet healing system. And so he's the one that introduced me to it, and was at a jam session. Me and my friend, I had this big old plate. They used to have the free buffet, had this big old plate, chicken wings and all this stuff. And I'm sitting there eating it, and I'm looking at he's sitting across from us, and he just gives us this look like he's got to say something. He can't hold it back anymore. And so he starts talking about diet and what he's done. At that time, he had practiced the diet for over 20 years. And just things he was saying was just blowing my mind, but it was making so much sense. And we ended up, after the jam session, talking for like another 2 or 3 hours outside. And so right after talking to him, I did what I always tell people not to do, which is I went and I did like a fruit fast for a week. Don't do that. Read the book, it's like literally I did what I tell people, don't do that. Now, in my case, it was cool because physically it worked for me. And then I had read the Mucus diet book, and I was able to start the transition. A lot of people, their bodies doesn't react well to just going on to all fruit with no transition. But yeah, so I read the Mucus diet, started to really get serious about applying the principles, transitional methodologies. And 6 months later, I'd lost 100 pounds. And but the interesting thing was, there people that were seeing me every day there was some people that didn't really notice I had lost weight until I had lost a bunch of it. My trombone teacher, I'd already lost most of it, when one day we were in our lesson, and he's like, "Did you lose some weight? You've been seeing me." Yeah, I've been losing weight the past 6 months, but it happened naturally and gradually. So it was never like where it's all of a sudden look real weird. And so So that was the thing. But once I got introduced to that Mucus's diet and started going down the path, I first read the book, and it answered my questions about the root cause of human suffering and the root cause of human illness and disease. It laid it out perfectly in a way that I just had never, it made so much sense. Like, it rang to me, but I didn't, it was just like, dang, why don't more people know this? But at the same time, I was also ready to receive esoteric information because I'd been studying things considered to be esoteric kinds of texts and philosophies and ancient documents and all. I'd been diving into all that kind of stuff, so that when this came along, and it was like, I can't believe more people don't know about this. But actually, I do believe that, because I knew what kind of search I was on, and like I said, I'd been exposed to so many things that very few people up to that point were being exposed to, and having an open enough mind to take it in and to really look at it objectively and see that, does this make sense? Does it make sense or not? And it's not that I agreed with everything, especially on first read. As I tell people, when you read the book, don't, it's one of the older styles of writing where there's philosophy, spiritual concepts mixed in with scientific concepps. So it's not meant to be a piece of academic science. It's not meant to be just a piece of philosophy. It's how folks is more common in the older text. You see that stuff.
Yeah,
but
just a broad perspective and understanding. So it seems like from your experience, you had this experience when you were young that propelled you to have a pursuit in your spiritual quest, which is a very Buddhist concept in a way. They always say that there's only a couple of things that they can trigger your spiritual quest, and one of them is a big suffering in your life, primarily from a loss of close family members. And then but also seems that this study of either through the self-help or through the esoteric ancient textbooks that you're talking about kind of like prepared you mentally, emotionally, and spiritually to be able to receive such an upgrade in your diet, and being able to embrace it and bring it in and kind of like merge it with your thought process and your spiritual development at the moment. So it seems like there was a great preparation for you. So there was like a good soul orchestration.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is great, So I'm glad that you were exposed and you were able to trigger that pursuit. So to allow you to follow to where you went, which is fantastic. On that level, I think I wanted to talk about or ask you about something that's very cool, because and from your personal perspective, nowadays, even though it's in the young stages to be talked in a massive way, but there is plenty of knowledge, and a lot of people talk about the psychological, psycho-emotional side of detox, right? People know that there's going to be things in the mental, emotional are going to come up when you're detoxing, but because the detox in a certain way, we're just seeing a new wave of this that has been kind of like not being used in, I will say, pretty much since the times of Louis Pasteur to now, that people put detox as a form of healing or as a form of practice has been really put on the on the side, or not even acknowledged. But the people they do, and now it's become more popular, they see this. So what was your experience with this within yourself? And how did you recognize it? How did you realize it? How did you navigate it?
So,
because you were also pretty young, and trying to find you had Brother Air for you there as a as a person that could guide you, but also how how you
Yeah.
navigate it.
Yeah. So I just really, I had influences at the time and even before where where studying was a cool thing to do. And around that age, I was into, people ever heard of like the Black Power movement and Black Panther Party and these and Malcolm X. I kind of went through this period of that development where I was very much a cultivating the revolutionary part of my spirit, where that was something that was always there. And uh so that what came to mind, I thought when I had there was this political radio show when I was in high school that I had said something about at that time President Bush, W. Bush. I was like, we don't want to crackhead for president. So, but now I was like at high school and everybody looked like what are you saying? But I just had this attitude like I'm gonna say what I want to say. I don't care what age I am, and I'm not scared to put it on the microphone and say it, and I'll say it to their face too. Like, hey, whatever. And so so I had the basis of that kind of attitude, because like we say, there's nothing more revolutionary than learning how to control what you put into your body, learning how to control what you eat, and practicing the Mucus diet healing system to us is the most revolutionary thing that you can do, because it's diametrically opposed to everything that they say you're supposed to value in terms of the value system, the thought processes. It's not just what you're eating, it's how you live, how you think. And so I was open to that. Like that was part of what I was looking for. So when I found it, I recognized that's what this is. Like this gives me the opportunity to really do what it was that I wanted to do, which was I didn't want to fit in. I didn't want to fit into the thing. I didn't need validation from people. I would much rather people look at me weird. Like, who is this? What's this guy? Like I would rather that than to fit in and to, that whole thing. And what ended up happening as an artist and as I get older, it's like, it's a weird kind of where people, the acceptance goes up and up and up. But back then it was just this attitude that I had about, I just don't care. I'm not trying to, I stopped going to restaurants. I stopped going to, at that time I used to go to clubs and bars and all that kind of stuff and hang out and drink and smoke and that whole scene. And I consciously was like, I'm done with that. And I am focused on this path. And I don't know what's at the other end of this path, but I know that it's going to be different than if I'd have stayed on that path. Because I knew that path, I was already, I went from 250 to 300 pounds in less than a year. When I went from a freshman, I'd be like, if I hadn't died yet, I definitely would probably be like 400 something pounds. Yeah. Just horrible mm-hmm. health. And so I just was like, no, this is it. And in terms of emotional elimination, I had an understanding, again, because I did study a lot, and I read and reread the books and got any copies of the different types of Eric's books, and I would just rinse and repeat, just keep reading it, keep going over it, having the discussions with Brother Air and other people in the community. So I was getting a sense of what I would need to do. And when it came to the emotional, that was kind of something that was within me to a certain extent. Like I had conversations with Brother Air about it, but that wasn't something necessarily where he he said, yeah, it's something you got to deal with, but you're kind of like, you're on your own. You got to go deal with it. Like, you let you know that you got to deal with it, but here you go. And so I found ways to deal with. So what I try to prepare people for, and one of the reasons that Eric talks about, this book is called Rational Fasting. It's not called extreme fasting. It's rational. There's a system to it. And so you don't start somebody out with like a 40-day water fast or a 40-day juice fast or something like that. You start off with, let's eat mucus free for a while. Maybe can you eat once a day? Do a once a day level fast, or juice, do a 2-day juice fast, or what, but then you can grow that as you actually get the reference experience and you learn how that feels in your body, and you learn how to break the fast, which is the most important part of the fast. People get excited about these long fasts and then they lose total control when it's time to break it. And it's like, you've been better off not fasting at all.
Oh yeah, I've seen people rush for burritos after a fast, for sure.
Yeah. I've seen it. Yeah. It's all because people aren't following this, like the methodology. And so I got really into the methodology, but I kind of understood as all the old emotions would start to surface, particularly during fasting periods. Because when you fast, you're eliminating the toxic waste, and the stuff is able to unearth physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually, stuff is going to move too. And so that's where for me, the Sedona method release technique, which is just a releasing technique, and you could do it with, if you're into different types of self-hypnosis or neuro-linguistic programming or whatever, there's the list of things that people could do that have varying levels of success. The thing is, you got to find something that works really well for you. For me, Sedona method is like perfect. And it's very natural. There's nothing you got to believe. There's no dogmatic kind of thing, but this ability that our brain has with the neuroplasticity to rewire itself, it gets into that. So when you combine the power of emotional release along with fasting, along with the colon irrigation and getting out all the black tar slime and all the mess out of your body, that's really powerful. And so I went through periods that would scare some people, because what happens is when people get a taste of who they really are, is what the Mucus diet does in these kind of practices, is it lets you know who you actually are without the stimulant. Because most people have no clue if you're drinking coffee, if you're smoking cigarettes, if you're smoking weed, if you're eating pus and mucus forming foods, meat and the dairy, if you're doing any of those things, you really haven't met yourself yet sober. And so the fasting process gives you an opportunity to see, well, how do you actually feel in your body without stimulant? Do you feel good? Do you feel better? You're like, wow, I feel really comfortable in my body. Or do you feel miserable? Unfortunately, many people, when you take their stimulant away from them, they feel absolutely miserable in their body. And that's the problem. That's why we talk about the slow transition to get to the point where you clean enough of that stuff out so that you do feel really good in your body. But as you remove the stimulants, the whatever emotional baggage and old stuff, it starts coming up. And you not only have to deal with, is you could spend several years just dealing with your own emotional things since birth. And I mean, you could spend a long time with that, but you're also dealing with ancestral carryovers, things that are embedded into the cells, in the genetic memories and different concepts that people have for that. But that's a real thing, at least to me, that I experienced in terms of, mean, I went through eliminations where I was craving foods that I'd never ate before. I'm like, how do I even know what this tastes like? Like I'm craving buffalo. I've never eaten buffalo before. I must have had an ancestor that had some buffalo at some point, because all of a sudden I wanted some. And but then I go do an enema, and this kind of stuff comes out of me, and I no longer want it anymore. So it's like, that's the thing. These cravings come, and you, instead of what the problem I see with a lot of people is they're so hard on themselves about their addiction to the things they're addicted to, the pus and the mucus and the energy drinks and the this and the that or whatever. And I always recommend, instead of doing that, don't be hard on yourself about that. Be proactive with what you're going to do to aid your body in removing the stuff that makes you feel addicted to those things in the first place. And as long as you have the old meat residues and the dairy residues and that kind of stuff in your system, you're going to crave it. But as soon as it's gone, you can't even, because that we hear that all the time with people. I could never stop eating meat, or I could never give up my dairy and my cheese. I love cheese too much.
Yeah.
That's not them talking. That's their addiction.
And the parasites, so they can be getting hungry.
And the parasites and the tapeworms and all that stuff. And and so yeah, but it's a big deal. It's something that I want to talk about a lot more in more video. I have videos about it, but it's definitely something that continues to come up, because I talk about times where real early on in the transition where I would have where I had rage, right, where I had a lot of anger. See, a lot of people have different. That's another thing you can analyze, or some people have different eliminations.
Of course, fear, insecurity, anger.
Yeah, and then where the depression, and that's where the Power versus Force books and those kinds of things are fun to look at, and the different energy levels, theories of from depression to apathy and those different levels. And so I was always able to manage to generally be above that depression level, but I've worked with a lot of people that kind of start off there, so I'm empathetic to that. And but it's like you can't run from it. You have to really almost like meld into that emotion, meld into that,
and ignore it, can't avoid it.
Yeah, right? you got to let it, but then once you know how to actually feel it and let it go, then you start to get lighter and lighter, and you feel like and you start to feel better and better with it. And like I said, you combine the emotional elimination with the physical, and now you're on to something.
You're in your early times of adopting this, you found a lot of that revolutionary spirit you're talking about comes also with a lot of courage. The courage of not just standing for yourself, like you said, and not caring about what other people think or say. Not the courage of saying, "Yeah, I don't need to belong to this group, even though because I don't need their acceptance." And so it feels like it's a lot of courage, but also translates in the emotional courage to say, "Hey, you know what? I need to also look into this, even though it might be painful, even though it might be scary, even though it might bring me rage and anger. It's something that I cannot avoid it either." So the courage to address it,
right,
that you developed, seems it was crucial for you to be able to say, "Hey, you know what? There's no escape. There's no other way." And this is it. And I feel this is kind of part of I think the next question is, do you feel that this perhaps not a lot of people have this impulse to look for, in your case, a Sedona method or other self-help methods, but do you think that this really, I feel like we're in a society that the emotional side is completely suppressed, either through drugs, through numbing foods, or through workaholism and all the other addictions that you were mentioning? And do you think this emotional baggage is an impediment for people to trying to adopt this kind of diet? Because if they, right away, maybe the subconscious level, they know that they will have to deal with those issues.
Yeah, I would say the first thing that comes to mind is a lot of people are unwilling because they either they don't understand, and then two, you know, even if they do, they're unwilling to go through the repercussions of what they have done, whether they've been breaking the law. And just because they didn't know that they were breaking the law doesn't mean that they're not going to be punished for it, the cause and effect. And so as you become more conscious of this and you get cleaner, then you start to understand, I have to, because there's not only your own baggage, but now you ate animals that were suffering as they were dying. And so every bite of that, every morsel of that suffering animal, you're going to pay some kind of eliminatory repercussion for that, physical, emotional. Now, when you get good at the art of practicing this, then you can learn how to take on and eliminate decades worth of emotional, spiritual, physical elimination in a shortened period of time. But that is more advanced type of stuff. That's the kind of stuff that I work with when I have, you know, clients or coaching things or that kind of stuff. Yeah. Like we'll get into that kind of stuff because it's you know, it's a little too advanced for the YouTube audiences, but you can do that, but there's still a you know, you have to, whether you do it slowly over the course of the rest of your life, or you learn how to, like, in those when you take those opportunities, because you can't force that, but what happens is your body will give you an opportunity to go through a really intense elimination. And if you're not scared of it, because what I've seen happen, and this is what I tell people, don't do that. So I'll get people that they want to do all of these cleanses all the time. So what do you think, Spira? Can I do a 21-day cleanse? Like, well, why are you doing the cleanse? Oh, well, I don't, I just want to do a cleanse. It's like, well, you got to have a better reason than you just want to do it because you saw somebody else do it. But that same person, because what I teach is go with your body. Like you transition into learning and to cultivate your intuition so that when your body gives you the signals to, we call it, shutting it down, where you kind of shut the world out and, it's just like, I'm focused on my fasting. It's a reaction immediately. You start going through elimination, start to fast. And so I teach people to really, to wait, just wait until don't be so like, oh, I want to hurry. It's like, man, believe me, your body is going to, like, once it's here, you might, you might be like, okay, this did happen a lot faster than I thought it was. But what happens is the body is going to give you that opportunity to go through a really intensive elimination period. And when you have the tools, and that's again why I think the short-term fasting methodology is perfect. The transitional methodology is perfect because you get the reference experiences through a number of different short-term fasting periods, so that when your body does get into a more healing crisis type of phase, then you don't have to think about it. You're immediately, and that was one thing, and I do notice that was kind of different for me. And then when I see some other people, is other people, when they're feeling good, they want to do all this stuff. Like, I'm a fast and do all that. As soon as they start to not feel good, or they get a little cold or flu-like symptom or a little fever, then they start freaking out. And they're like, oh, why am well, and then they want to slow the elimination down. And I'm like, why? You're not in danger of death. It's like, that's when, if you're in danger, we're going to slow your elimination down. But these are sometimes young people, and it's like, no, now your body is actually giving you the opportunity to really, really advance, because now you can put years worth of elimination into a couple weeks if you know what you're doing.
Yeah. And also there's that, like you're saying, what I've seen quite a bit is the addiction to the detox, the addiction to the healing, the addiction to that spectrum that can create a lot of problems. So I like what you're saying about, take it easy and allow yourself as an individual, not to copy other people, but to understand your own rhythm, your own pace, which is really, really cool. Because I think even though we're all human beings, we're all going through different things. And so that's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. I think from your perspective, and of course for the people that you have helped, how do you see that this has caused an impact on their spiritual life and spiritual development? Do you see a spiritual benefit to this? I've seen a lot of people nowadays, and that is very easy for certain spiritual or religious groups to talk about fasting. It's very easy to talk about prayer, but when you touch the topic of food, it becomes touchy, even for everybody, right?
Right.
And I don't want to call anybody out. I just want to see from your personal perspective. I'm not saying that they're doing it right or wrong. From a neutral perspective, what is your perspective on the spiritual benefits that this diet can bring to someone and brought to you?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's a cornerstone. It's really a cornerstone because you can study a lot of the philosophies, and there's all these different. And what you start to really find is, for whatever reason, for one reason or another, the diet is the missing link in almost all of these different systems. Some of it might touch on it a little bit or have something that's a little improved, or be like, well, don't, you can drink milk, but don't eat meat and this, or don't eat only fish on Tuesdays or whatever. They'll have different things, but none of them really come and hit it in the way that the Mucus diet does in Arnold Ehret, where it's just like, no, this is the foundation. You build a spiritual foundation on a clean vessel. Because if you, as Brother Ehret told me a long time ago, if you want to be filled up with the knowledge and the beneficence of the universe, you got to be empty first. So you're not going to be running around all, bloated up and then getting these brilliant discoveries and all this kind of stuff. Now, society will try to convince you that that's how it works. So they'll bring out all these physicists that are all, big and have horrible diets, and be like, oh, these are the most brilliant people on the planet. Look at them, and roll them out in their wheelchairs or whatever. And it's like, again, they're missing out on, for all these guys' brilliance. And Einstein knew about Professor Arnold Ehret because he was good friends with Fred Hirsch, and he used to go to Fred Hirsch's, I'd call it like a retreat. It was a retreat in California that a lot of famous people went to, and they call it the last resort, because it was Highland Springs Resort. And so people would go there, and then they had like regular kind of camping kinds of fun things there, but then they also had a thing where Hirsch would, he would help people if they were there sick or something. But even then, even some of these people that were supposed to be the most brilliant minds on the planet, they could not get this part. They couldn't put that together, even if they was exposed to it. It didn't click in for them for whatever reason. And so I just think, whether you blame it on a karmic past or just straight addiction, or for whatever the reason is, the diet and this level of dietary transformation and the spiritual transformation that comes about as a result of it, it's a blind spot. It's just natural blind spot amongst the history of humanity. And it's fascinating to me when I really read, when you really go through history, and some of these like brilliant minds and people, and you'll see them touch on it just a little bit. Socrates, like he acknowledges, like, yeah, if we have a city of pigs, then we're going to have more doctors, and more people are going to get sick more, and but we'll create more jobs. It's like he discussed it. A lot of people discuss it in different ways. You got Buddha didn't break his fast very well. And that wouldn't be recommended to break a fast like that. And so that's how we look at it. This is this missing link. We're not saying that we got it all, but this is a piece that everybody needs. Like all of the different disciplines, all the different spaces need this part. And once we have this in place, you're going to bring whatever you put time into in terms of your spiritual work and all, you're going to bring that into this. And I say that to athletes, because then athletes are, can I still do it? It's like, if you have already developed certain things, you're going to bring that into this. It's whatever you bring, you're going to be able to develop it, maintain it if you want to. Is your value, but you also got to be open to your value system potentially changing. And if it does, then you may no longer want to do. And that's another thing that scares people, because they get scared about, oh, will I not want to do things that I currently like to do? And that's possible that you won't, because that's part of the spiritual. For me, that was part of the spiritual change.
Yeah, people talk a lot about what I'm gonna eat for, Thanksgiving. People get scared about losing their relationships, losing their habits, and all that stuff. And I think you tapped into a couple of things that I think are very important. And I think it would be cool if we can, just quickly elaborate in both of them. One was, your the fear that people might face, because, what we're looking into is that this diet, according to your perspective and what has done to you, it just brought a lot of, in a sense, honesty, meaning you cannot hide from yourself anymore, and the things that you're carrying within yourself, your own thoughts, your own actions, your own baggage, karmic baggage of your behaviors, and etc. And so I feel like, in a way, this has an impact on your ethical behavior, in your moral behavior, and also the way that you connect with your own essence, to your own, like you're saying, your true self outside of all the nonsense. So would you just elaborate a little bit about how the actual diet itself helped you connect more with yourself, with your own essence, and allowed you to have that shift in perception and perspective of your own behaviors, of your own ethical and moral understanding?
Yeah. So, and this is something I talk about a lot with ethical vegans that try to promote veganism from the ethical standpoint, which is cool, which is fine. Like, as I like that, but I try to get them to understand not everybody is going to, it's not going to work for everybody. But what will work for everybody is physiological transformation first. Because before I got on this path, if I had that type of attitude where I would have killed the animal myself, because I had enough consciousness to know, well, I'm eating it. It's a dead animal that I'm eating. So yeah, I'll kill it if I had to, was it okay?
Yeah, most people come from that space for sure. And absolutely. Now, my question comes from the perspective of, because I've seen, I went to vegan festivals and they put, the pig slaughtering, stuff, and people just turn around and they go get a burger. They don't care, that has a very small impact. But what I'm asking you is the ethical and moral behavior, not just towards animals, but towards yourself and to other people, as how you conduct yourself in life.
Right. Well, that's what I was kind of getting to with so what happened. So that was where I was at, whether you're talking animals, you're talking, getting me and my boys would get into fights with people and enjoying being in that type of environment, enjoying, picking fights, enjoying, bully. There's times where I was a bully in high school, where I was kind of analyze that from the perspective of, in movies, they show like there's like one bully, but what I find is there's a whole bunch of individual bullies that might bully one person. Like there's this one person that this one other person bullies. And they're not like a bully to everybody in the school. They got like one person that they focus in on. And I was bullied in that way. And there was a couple people that I bullied as well from that type of dynamic. And so with the Mucus's diet, months into doing the cleansing, doing the lemon juice and distilled water enemas, getting off of the meat, getting off the dairy, and during a fast, I had an epiphany. And one of the things that I had chosen to do during this a longer fast, maybe 5 or 6 months into practicing the diet, was I watched some slaughterhouse documentaries. And then I just sat there and just started crying because it hit me. But it took all of that. It took dozens of lemon juice and distilled water enemas. It took removing pounds of this out of my intestines and
just able to empathize and feel it, basically,
to be able to have that
numbness out of the way.
To get the numbness out of the way, to cultivate the consciousness, cultivate the empathetic consciousness, to really understand that, not on an intellectual level, but to really feel it. And so that's something that I really try to get people to understand, is that because if you already think you're empathetic, you have no clue until where you're going to end up until you go down this path and you start cleaning yourself up. It's because it's a whole different level. It's a whole different type of experience. And so so my entire ethical and philosophical outlook and spiritual, all that stuff changed. It's just totally transformed.
Yeah, that's cool. One of the things that I feel like would be interesting to tap into is that how do you, there are two things that I think they're pretty cool that we can talk about before we end. One is that I've seen that there's a lot of sometimes hatred behavior towards this diet. You see, you don't see, like, even though some vegans start from an activist perspective, but there's, typically speaking, when people clean themselves to the way that you're describing, there's a lot more patience, there's a lot more tranquility. But from the other perspective, every time that there's no one single YouTube video or comment on Instagram or social media that you see that doesn't have a hater there trying to attack it. So where do you see that this is coming from within people, and why there's this because it's an aggressive attack. It's not like, oh, you know what, I don't think you're right, we can discuss it logically, say, okay, you know why 99% of people eat this way and they're all very sick, and maybe the people don't eat this way, they're not sick, right? There's no conversation, and it is a very aggressive situation. Where do you think this comes from on people, and why do they need to attack it?
Well, we call that pus and mucus poisoning. That's where that comes from, is either all poor behavior. Our argument is that all poor behavior of humans, the foundation of it is pus and mucus eating. And, and that's a whole other, the longer discussion, what's the difference between pus and versus mucus and that kind of stuff. But we put it all of the above. Pus and mucus eating is when you start to remove that, then, and the source of it, you remove the capacity for a murderer to murder and a rapist to rape and somebody who wants to control or put out genocide on a people. That goes away. That is cleansed away, literally flushed down the toilet when you go down this path. When you do this work, you no longer, if you're the type of person that, if you enjoyed being a predator, you like going to bars and picking fights, or you are walking down the street and you just had this energy, like you want to, looking for somebody to fight with, that that goes away. And what happens is you have people that are addicted to that energy. They're addicted to that stimulant of, that aggressiveness and that just, all of that kind of that whole energy. And so you get those kind of people that are somebody recently said, we did a podcast, and a friend of somebody that was on the podcast said they couldn't watch it because we were too calm. Like, we're not
peaceful, man. Come on.
We're too calm and peaceful, and so people want that. And look at the popular entertainment that people consume, and you can see it. It's all, so much of it is just this different cultural expressions of war posturing. And that's an old tradition in music, and you've always had the war, the battle cries, and that music that was meant to scare the other people. And you see that obviously, hip hop and rock music and all these different traditions, they always have the, we're bigger and badder than you, don't mess with us because we'll kill you, type of vibration. And young people in particular, because there's another thing to analyze, and this is a little more advanced concept, but when you start to really analyze the lives of people in general, particularly those that are mainstream pus and mucus eaters, you'll see as people age, from a physiological standpoint, a lot of these people, it's not that they outgrow. There's a lot of circumstances where there's a lot of people, as they get older and older, their consciousness isn't rising. They're not outgrowing the kinds of things that they used to do when they were young. Physiologically, Mother Nature is forcing them to not be capable of doing that anymore. So you can go into a nursing home and look at a bunch of people in their 70s and 80s. And if you were to just wind them back into when they were in their 20s, they would still be at the rock concert, in the mosh pit. They'd still be going to the club. They'd still be picking fights at the bar. Mother Nature has, because they continue to break laws, physiological laws, Mother Nature has put them in a situation where, and you got to analyze this, look at it. They're put on a forced fast. Most elders that that's in their 80s or in their 70s, they cannot eat the same amount of food that they could eat when they were 20 years old. Well, why does that happen? Well, it looks like a forced fast to me. That's where Mother Nature steps in and says, you've been breaking all these laws for all these decades. You're not going to get it. So to try to keep you alive, okay, we'll make it easy for you to eat less. But you're more decrepit. You can't function the way you did before in terms of your walking and this kind of stuff. And so what you start to see on this path is how much slower aging truly can and should happen than what is the norm. And then that becomes part of your paradigm shift, where you're saying like, oh wow, like that's, where the whole thing changes. So much of that youthful, and they talk about the youthful energy, and you see kids going and doing crazy stuff. They're hopped up on pus and mucus, on cheeseburgers, and whatever else people want to blame other drugs. And it's like, no, let's blame the cheeseburgers and the pizza and the hot dogs. And because then the older adults are like, well, I eat those things and I don't do that stuff. Yeah, because you're weak now. You've aged yourself prematurely, and physiologically you didn't evolve and somehow become more advanced with your consciousness. Mother Nature has taken that ability. It's not as easy for you to get up and down out of a chair and to bend over and pick something up. Over time, those 100%. Things start to affect you. And so that's, to me, that's a important piece to really understand that. And but these are the kinds of insights that you start to get when you go down this path, do this kind of study, and see the world through this lens.
Yeah, I really like what you tapped into, about aging, and that was, kind of like the next question. But before we get into that, I really like that you said about how when people start breaking nature laws, and if and we always talk to people, they come to us and say, look, if you put yourself in a forest 500 years ago, and if you follow this way of living, breaking the laws of nature, you not only will not be able to walk like you were just mentioning, but you will lose your most of your molars first and your teeth, and you will be able to chew through all the foods that you're used to do now, and you'll be forced to eat something that you can gum, that is just really fruit. So it looks like we tell people, like, either you follow nature now, or you're gonna have to suffer quite a bit, lose some teeth and everything else. And we're designed to eventually end over there as well. You see, cared for from somebody. They're just gonna give you the food you can all.
Liquidarian diet,
Yeah, you'll end up with just with juicy fruits and liquids. If you will lose your teeth as when you were a baby, right? But nowadays people put dentures, and they're trying heavily to continue their lifestyle without wanting the shift. So their ability to continue evolving, like you say, it almost like stubbornness takes over instead of evolution in many ways. So obviously you're not a
well, and it becomes for many a hellacious kind of experience. And I, like I said, when I was a real young, I spent a lot of time in nursing homes and hospitals. So I got to see, and this doesn't apply to everybody, but there's a lot of elders that have lost their spirit. And what I mean by that, whatever that quality of life and excitement about living, sometimes you'll come across some elders that have that, and it's beautiful. It's like, wow, you're enveloped by this
spark.
this energy,
Absolutely.
like they have something. They were able to hold on to something, their entire life. They never lost that. But then for every one of those elders you meet, then you'll see the folks that are just kind of just zoned out or depressed, or just and of course many of them don't have, because of the way our society is structured and the cultural value systems are structured, they're not getting visited by other family members and their own children and grandchildren. They get stuffed away in a home, and then they'll just kind of sit there. Somebody brings them these horrible meals. And
don't get me started on hospitals and nursing homes and their meals, because it's just we could do a whole
absolutely 1 hour unconscionable. Yeah.
Funny enough, I had the opportunity to read a book. They mentioned, I don't know if you ever heard of these folks, but they're contemporary with Arnold Ehart, the Herald of the Golden Age. There was a group of people in London, and they were all about fruitarianism, and they're strong proponents of it. And there was a guy in the head of a hospital, this doctor in Australia, and they turned everybody into a fruit-based diet. And actually in London, they were putting people on a fruit-based diet for a month before doing surgery, because they saw how much faster they'll recover. But a whole hospital in Australia back in the early 1900s turned around, and because they were like, oh, this is it,
Yeah.
But at that point, there was less.
And that was the period in that same time you would had like stuff like that, the sanitariums, and then the sanitariums at Errett, but he had his contemporaries. There was a lot more of that happening, and which of course the Rockefeller era went after it, and there's a whole history there.
Disappear, as we know. For more conversations to come. So how do you feel? And this is really cool. I was interviewing Dr. Graham like about a month ago, and he said something really cool. And I said, how does it feel to age in this diet? We're talking about elders and this. Of course, you're not 19 anymore. You went through a whole long trajectory in life, not just in recovery, but how your vitality is sustained and your health is sustained on this level. So he was saying that he feels that the raw food diet has not increased his longevity. He just has taken away the things they're, taking down life to make it shorter. And you were kind of like, touching on that subject a little earlier. It's like, you're putting all these things, you're going to shorten your life span. It might not increase it, it just might tap into what is naturally intended for us to live. So how do you feel that this diet and this understanding, how does it feel like aging, and this, 19 anymore? I see a few whites there, like I do as well. And, we're going through adulthood and, eventually elderly years. And how do you feel that, of course, without comparison, because you cannot split yourself in two and say, well, half of me did this and half of me did that, and without, of course, comparing to other people, because they don't have the opportunity to do sometimes what you're doing. But how does it feel within yourself?
Well, you can analyze the history, but you got to do it in a certain way. You can't do the Eurocentric history where they're talking about how, we live so much longer now than we used to and all that nonsense. It's like,
that's what I'm like, no comparisons,
Yeah.
How does
like,
it feel? I'm a guy here, that I'm, X years old, and regardless of how other people feel, this is how I feel, this is how I have felt throughout, X amount of years that I'm doing it. And see what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, so, I mean, this is where probably the most controversial thing that I would say in our community, we have people that believe in physical immortality, where that we believe that it's not normal, that there isn't, that this lifespan concept would be problematic, that we have potentially degenerated ourselves down into a situation where we're not going to get to because there's all these different traditions that speak of the people that lived 500 and 1,000 and tens of thousands of years, and we have it in our mythologies of the celestials and the demigods and the so on and so forth, the people that with no beginning and no ending, that do not pass away because there's no need to. So if the human body, as Arnold Ehret suggests, is an air gas engine that operates off of air, then that opens up a whole panacea of questions of things like, well, wait a minute, because now we can get into a whole different paradigm of why do we eat? So do we eat to get calories and nutrients and proteins and this and, or as Ehret suggests, do we eat to aid the body in its natural elimination processes? Because the body is constantly eliminating. When we prematurely age ourselves, when we do move closer to a death process, and I'll point out that the word death has the word eat in it, as the word creature has the word eat in it, and earth has eat in it. We're the creatures on this eating planet of, people that just have totally lost the understanding of what this eating thing is really all about. That puts it into a whole different kind of framework. And so, because if the body is a perpetual motion air gas engine, and that's like a theory in physics of the ideal perpetual motion engine, that if there was possible for something to keep moving and never degrade or destroy itself, we start looking at the body, and again, they're so self-absorbed into themselves and their experience and their, I want to be fruitarian, I want to be a breatharian, I want to, as opposed to what I suggest people do is think in terms of bloodline and generations. So you do the best you can with the information you have, with your transition, have some children and raise them up. And what we can have totally different conversation about the longevity of humans when you're 2 or 3 generations into children that were brought up on the Mucus's diet and they commingle with other children that are practicing the Mucus's diet. And now you're talking about the transformation of the human race that Arnold Ehret talks about. And I call it that we would shift, and other people talk about that. To me, this is the real shift from Homo sapien to Homo spiritus, is this work. Yeah. But yeah. So I agree with because we got people in our community that are pretty close to, I mean, Brother Air, he in the past 20 years, he's maybe eaten like 9 months or something. I mean, but he's trans, but that was all a result of transitioning. And we don't promote that. We don't say that this is what your goal should be, or that this is what we're trying to, whenever we talk about that, we're trying to show you that everything you think you know about nutrition in the human body is totally wrong, because we'd all be dead with the amount of fasting that we've done and the kind of things we've done. We'd be gone.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that was fascinating to me, going into this was, I practiced martial arts when I was a teenager. I continued to work out through my 20s. On my 30s, I got really into yoga during my 20s. Then on my 30s, I incorporated capoeira and yoga together. So by the book, I should have been, as flexible as a rubber band. And I was really stiff. And having very little progress.
Right.
But when I started my emotional release, I will see a benefit. But what the real benefit on it came was when I changed the diet, and all of a sudden I tell people, look, now I'm on mid-40s. I'm more flexible. I haven't worked out or stretched in 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
In 10 years, I have not worked out. I have not done any yoga, any capoeira, any stretching. And I'm more flexible today than 10 years ago when I was just stretching 5 times a week.
Yeah.
And I spent the whole decade prior, or the 15 years prior, doing it.
Right.
So I do have, in my personal experience, some tangible things to say, there's something about it. And I, besides the theories of, like those scientists that they took a cell and say, hey, what if I clean it? If they basically isolated
the chicken cell experiment. It would live forever in theory, if as long as you clean
you just clean up, you can do that. But besides all that, there are tangible things, like we say about aging in this diet. I'll say, well, typically people get stiffer as they age. People get
I mean, if you just go through like the benefits of the I mean, I'm stronger now than I was 15 years ago. As far as like if I go into the gym and I get on some weights, I could do almost double what I could do 15 years ago or even 10 years ago. And same thing with the I was stiffer 10, 15 years ago than I am now. So yeah, all that stuff is, and I guess, and we don't even, and we don't even think about that kind of stuff, because that's what you get doing this work. You're gonna, it's like, we work hard, so you're gonna get those benefits are gonna be there. You're doing this kind of work where because, and then there's certain if you bring a genetic weakness in, like say, I already, before I started practicing the diet when I was 18 years old, I already had a little gray spot there before I started practicing diet. So what the diet did was, it's like, it's not necessarily gonna, because those are, if there's damaged cells in the follicles there, it didn't necessarily just totally reverse. Does that such an intense genetic thing that was coming in, but what it did was prevent it from probably have a whole head of gray hair,
you know, just be
the whole hair,
now.
or it'd be my hair be gone. There's something, you know,
Yeah,
start
exactly.
because I think my dad had started having some issues and stuff, you know, around this age, and I think I got that gray thing from him because I think he had a little gray at a real young age. And so, but people they look too much into that stuff, like the some of these these things that are really, whether it's like, you know, the body and wanting this perfect specimen, like the way it looks and every little thing perfect, is like that's not, is your heart, your kidneys, your lungs, your adrenal glands, your thyroid, like, are those functioning at the highest level that they can? And is your body free of obstruction? As long as you're doing
Exactly.
that,
Absolutely.
you know, who knows how long you can be around.
Yeah, and also gives the opportunity to have a different experience as a mature, as a adult and elderly. You know, we're talking about how elders are just, you know, confined to this homes, you know, and do we have an alternative to it? And I feel like, you know, following this, you know, other people say, hey, you know what, I just want to take care of myself. But, you know, what we do today, of course, has repercussions to the future. We can choose by the actions that we're taking today, how we're taking care of ourselves. Of course, shape a different
It's a hard piece of wisdom to teach to young people, because I there was something that I did, was very, once I got on this path, I became very conscious of that. But again, I had the background of being around those environments. A lot of young people never really been around elders like that. They might have, maybe they had a grandparent,
and we never think that one day we will. And what we're
there's a big denial in any of that, and people just essentially live lives where, as long as you have the same diseases as everybody else around you, then you're fitting in, and that's you're good.
It's autoimmune and genetic, and you deal with it.
Yeah. And so it's, you know, and then people come in, if you get diagnosed with something, everybody's real, you know, there's like supportive of doing certain things and stuff. And so it's, as opposed to when you want to try to heal yourself going down this path, again, that's where you got to be strong and courageous, because you're probably not going to have, even though, as Eric says, when you're doing this, you're really doing deep healing of like chronic illness, you're laying on Mother Nature's operating table. But if you go and get chemo, you know, everybody, man, people are bringing balloons, and they're like, all this love, and I hope you're good, and donations and all this kind of stuff. If you are, okay, I need to do an extended fast to heal whatever the ailment is, so I might be bedridden for a couple weeks, or just mostly laying in bed, and I might get real skinny. I might look a little underweight, and won't look my best, but I got to go through this process. Then you got, you know, people trying to call, you know, saying, you know, call hospitals on you and wanting to take you into, you know, it's like, and so that's where you do get that element of the courageousness, at least at this time period. And the work we're doing, we try to make it where it is a little bit more out there. The communities are forming of support, but we're still in a period where you're not as much on your own as you were 20 years ago. But in terms of, if you're trying to get support from your family, you're on your own. You know, you are still very much on your own.
It was a long walk, my friend. Holy moly, you know, no, definitely things are changing, and, you know, thanks to people like you and many other people that are bringing this to the world, you know, and definitely there's more people, you know, taking the courage and seeing that this is possible, and seeing that there is a brighter future for themselves, and doesn't have to look like, you know, we have seen so far, you know, and this, I think, takes me to the last question that I really like, which is, you know, of course, this is like a very utopic idea and far out, but how in in the perfect world, if all of a sudden, and we've seen this movement is happening, more people trusting in adopting it, seeing the results and the benefit. If a significant amount of people, follow this and adopt this, how do you think that that will impact and change our society? Like if you just close your eyes and say, okay, you know what, all of a sudden, we are 8 billion people, and now, I don't know, 4 or 2 or 5 billion people will do this. How our world will look like?
Well, one, that's not going to happen because we still got to apply principles of transition. And if that many people got on the diet,
years from now, right? Let's say 200 years from now, whatever, right? Regardless.
Well,
of
yeah, no, I mean that. So
okay.
we're going to go through. There's going to be there's people don't like me even talking about it. There's going to be a human mass extinction. There's a lot of folks are going to prematurely pass where they didn't have to. But the decisions that are being made now, what's happening is this significant split. So there's the smaller group of people like us and the raw foods people and the more conscious vegans and Mucus diet practitioners, but people that are getting hip to this path. And those are people that when as pandemics come and there's all this death and destruction, we got a little taste, all this death and destruction around, and everybody's like just literally walking down the street and you see people dropping down dead. Like we're close to that. Like we're not that far away from that kind of reality. And in some places on the earth, on the planet, it was already there. What's going to happen is that's going to be like tenfold. And again, but those of us that have decided to go down this path, we're just going to be like, I don't know, we did what we could do to try to tell you but it's going to be a path of no return, a point of no return, and too late for a lot of people. So if you're talking 200, 300 years into the future, we will have already been through the human mass extinction, not a total extinction of the species, mind you, but a large percentage is gonna fall out. But in the meantime, we're doing our work to try to build a nation of mucus-free people, people that live going in this direction. So what we would like to do is to, as we do that, broadcast that out to the world to show people that there's another way to live, that there is another way to live. There's another economic systems that we can develop, and other whole other ways like this. Everything that's out here, people just take some of the stuff for granted. These big cities and the way that the way houses are made and all this kind of stuff, and they don't really sit and think like all of this stuff was designed by humans, and they were designed by humans at a certain level of consciousness, and for the most part, all eating pus and mucus. So, because cities these big cities, this doesn't make any sense unless you're eating pus and mucus. It's when you look at it on a map, it's literally like it's like a big tumor on the earth. The way we're not supposed to have all this the concrete jungle and all these big, buildings where you're living on top of each other in these little huts kind of thing. It's like, no, there's plenty of room to spread out. If we had the consciousness and the infrastructure, we could, there's all kinds of different ways that we can live. But that's what the work we're going to do, together is we'll show people, and it starts now. So this is the embryo stage. This is our genesis. We're in the, we're in the part like, I think we're right before the flood, kind of thing.
And it seems that we went through like an initial shift, during the late 1800s, beginning of the 1900s, and that kind of like disappeared for a while, and now is coming back. And it never really disappeared as much as it was just suppressed. Just the back to nature consciousness, because you had the post-industrial it was like the reaction to industrialization in Germany and Switzerland and Europe. And so you had all in the late 1800s, all people like Ehret and others
in that period started looking to, we don't want to work in these factories. Like, what kind of life is this? You go work in this factory for somebody else's dream in these horrible conditions, getting injured and being sick. Then you come and you get just a little bit of money and you do. And is that a life? And so these folks were rejecting that and saying, you know what, we're going to take off all our clothes, go be nude in the woods somewhere and live off the land, and that was the emergence of that, at least within the European context in history, because it happened to different peoples at different points in history around the world. But the one that we're coming out of is that, back to nature renaissance of the late 1800s. And when Eric came over to Southern California, he couldn't go back to Germany in 1914 because of World War I. He got stuck in Southern California. And so with him and others, they had brought that consciousness and that whole piece over to Southern California, to where it still lives. There's still people there that are the residue of that. Right. It never went away, but it sort of had its zenith in the 60s, and you had the so-called hippie movement. The problem there was when that started getting a little too popular, and there's documents on this kind of stuff of different government agencies infiltrating the movement and getting people hooked on LSD and drugs and the whole drug thing being the focus.
To deviate it.
And so now it's our turn, and we're not, at least us, I'm not a pacifist, so I don't relate to the sort of that version of the 60s hippie thing. Is like, nah, we're not soft. Like we're as peaceful as you will ever want us to be and to meet. And but you ain't gonna mess with us. You're gonna just either leave us alone, be respectful, or just leave us alone. Is kind of the vibe. And so it's a different different thing now. It's a different kind of day, because we'll bring to it what we bring to it. But yeah, no, I think it's gonna be really, these next 20 years are gonna be really fascinating in terms of watching this, because it's gonna, like I said, on the crazy part of that's gonna get even crazier. Like, we haven't seen nothing yet, but on the cleanliness side and on where we're at, it's almost like we create this little protective bubble around our thing, and you just sort of sit there and watch. That's what the book. Well, people don't really understand it, but the book, The Tragedy of Nutrition, it's not tragedy in the sense of like, oh, they're not eating well. It's like, no, like literally people are eating the very thing that is killing them, that is causing them to behave poorly. And they're looking all around for why, God, what's the answer? Why are things so bad? Why are, and that's like literally a tragedy. And so we have that to look forward to in terms of just looking out there into the world and seeing some real tragedy get ramped up. And that's part of why we want to take whatever measures that we need to do to protect ourselves and to create our communities that are properly guarded and fortified, because that's a mistake we're not going to make, like some of our hippie ancestors that tried to, and just native ancestors that were tried to be peaceful and tried to have their little, like, oh yeah, we invite everybody in, and no, we're not going to go for that this time, and because that has never worked. So but yeah, so there's a lot of work to do, but yeah.
On the other hand, it seems that every time they would have had a big issue, like and the last one I think that I witnessed myself was I will say that big economic crash during 2008, 2009, and I thought it was fantastic. I was working for a construction company at the time. I lost, of course, my job. But the cool thing, I was already, well versed into things that kept me calm and just watching the show as everybody was freaking out. But the interesting outcome of it was a huge movement of self-sustainability. Everybody in the world for the first time were like, oh, maybe we should grow our own food, you know. And of course, people, you know, they're growing their own food. They realize, oh my gosh, I need 2.5 to 4 acres to just grow one cow. I don't think I'm gonna do that, you know. So then you see all these vegetable gardens and permaculture gardens starting to explode throughout the country, and even the word becomes part of the common vocabulary. That before I used to say permaculture, we were like, perma what? You know?
Right.
So it feels like every time they will have this upheavals, you know, either economic or any other levels, people, or even you were talking about the wars in Europe, the only people that did good and they survived really in a good way were the people who live in the countryside growing their own food.
Right.
And everybody else, you know, the ones in the cities were the ones that struggled the most. So in a way, yeah, it looks like and you know, Graham was saying the same. There's going to be some upheavals, you know, during transformation, but hopefully on the other side, we will see hopefully no more tragedies and people aging in a good way, people be following, like you say, the laws of nature, and hopefully more people will adopt it in a willingly, easy and good way. You know, at the end of the day, that's what we all want. You know, that's not for ourselves. It's like, but for other and for all of us. So hopefully, we'll see more of that.
Most
so, hope so. Hope so. I think I don't have any more questions. I think I could have a gazillion more questions. I think we could talk for hours and hours and on and on and on. But first, I want to just be respectful of your time and thank you for you know, for showing up, for sharing your perspective, your time, your experience, and all the good things that you have done. And I really appreciate, you know, what you and the people you follow have done. So thank you so much for everything. And hopefully we'll have more time to chat.
Yeah, sure. Man. So I'll leave your audience with a little excerpt that it goes along with what we're talking about. So this is in the section fasting for spiritual rebirth through superior fast. And I'm down in the third paragraph. If your blood stock is formed from eating the foods I teach, your brain will function in a manner that will surprise you. Your former life will take on the appearance of a dream. And for the first time in your existence, your conscience awakens to a real self-consciousness. Your mind, your thinking, your ideas, your aspirations, and your philosophy change fundamentally in such a way as to beggar description. Your soul will shout for joy and triumph over all misery of life, leaving it all behind you. For the first time, you will feel a vibration of vitality through your body like a slight electric current that shakes you delightfully. You will learn and realize that fasting and superior fasting, and not volumes of psychology and philosophy, is the real and only key to a superior life, to the revelation of a superior world, and to the spiritual world. So,
wow.
Yeah.
There's nothing else to be said after that.
Exactly. So, yeah, so I appreciate
everything.
you having me on. People can find me mucusfreelife.com and plug in, and I'm all over YouTube and all the different places, Instagram. But yeah, Emanuel, thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
That was the cherry on top. You're reading that. So awesome. So I appreciate it. All right. Hopefully we'll talk soon again. And thank you.
All right. Take care.
You too.